in an appearance on a state-run Russian news station, a State Duma member, Alexei Zaravlyov, essentially a member of their parliament, revealed that Russia was ready to retaliate against the US with nuclear weapons. Quote, "To destroy the east coast of the US, 2 Sarmat missiles are necessary, and 2 missiles for the west coast. 4 missiles and there will be nothing left. The mushroom will be taller than a high-rise. That mushroom will be visible from Mexico." The RS-28 Sarmat, aka Satan II, is a Russian ballistic missile unveiled by Putin in 2018, and it made its first test flight on April 20th, 2022. Weighing 208 tons and 14 stories tall, it's a part of Russia's land-based nuclear arsenal, and each missile can carry 15 warheads with the ability to obliterate an area the size of the UK in a single blast. Supposedly, each warhead is 100 times more powerful than the nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima in World War II. Putin also claims it is able to break through all modern anti-missile defenses. All of Russia's talk about blowing up US cities is because of NATO and US involvement in the Ukrainian war, as taxpayers' money is diverted to supplying arms to Vladimir Zelensky and his government. Just this week, Biden agreed to provide Zelensky with a $700 million weapons package. This is why Russian politicians are talking about nuking the east and west coast of the United States. Russian state TV essentially announced that World War III had already begun. Quote, "It's time to admit, perhaps, that Russia's special operation in Ukraine is now over, in the sense that a real war has started, World War III. Why is our government always involved in other nations' affairs? It only angers the bear and makes Russia feel threatened," as Russian ambassador to the UK, Andrei Kellen, said in a BBC interview.
We have a very strict provision on the issues of the use of tactical nuclear weapon, and it is mainly when the existence of the state is endangered.
So why push Russia into a defensive position that would certainly provoke an offensive attack? Does Biden want to start nuclear war? Is it a part of the slow and painful building of global government? Even though Russia's missiles are called Satan II, once the nuclear missiles start launching both ways, Satan will be laughing as we destroy ourselves and thinking to himself, mission accomplished. The federal government is openly preparing for fallout from nuclear war on U.S. soil in Austin, Texas. What do they know that they aren't telling us? The self-proclaimed exercise is called Cobalt Magnet 22 and is led by the U.S. Department of Energy's National Nuclear Security Administration. They brought more than 30 local, state, and federal agencies together to conduct a major radiological incident exercise, meaning they simulated a nuclear attack on a U.S. city. Obviously, they're preparing for war with Russia, as the U.S. government gets more involved in supporting Ukraine, both financially and militarily, and NATO continues to expand membership eastward, something they promised Russia in 1990 that they would never do. War with Russia would definitely escalate to nuclear bombs, but who's gonna strike first? Texas citizens were told to expect to see protective clothing and radiological detection equipment in the field, as well as low-flying aircraft and groups of first responders acting out the radiological incident at various locations across the city. The exercise is meant to enable government personnel to practice protecting public health and safety. However, the fact that this is even taking place is an indication that the federally run intelligence agencies believe nuclear war is not only possible, but probable in the near future. So what are they privy to? What does the federal government know that they aren't telling the American people? Could a nuclear attack be coming to the U.S. homeland sooner than we are allowed to think? Perhaps this will be our only heads up.
In today's world of fake news, misinformation, what else we have, what we all need are credible sources. So we need credible resources today.
Around page 270, toward the end of the book, there's a whole section on Ukraine, Russia, and using natural gas as a weapon. Now, this wasn't 2014 when they took Crimea, or 2020 when the invasion was being prepared, or 2022 when it broke out. This was 2011. 11 years ago, I was saying this is going to be used as a weapon, and here it comes. So it's interesting that the war was completely unnecessary. Now you say you saw it coming 10 years away.
You've always sounded the drum, like the dum, 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 dum. You've been warning everybody. But in the last, I would say, year, your pounding has gotten louder. The message is similar, but your warnings are more dire, louder, more direct. So that's what we want to talk to you about today, is how dire are we? Where are we today? What is happening? Yep. You talked about Executive Order 14067. What is your concern on Executive Order, which was just signed with Biden and company only a few months ago? What is your concern, 14067?
It has a number of parts, and the thing with executive orders, or for that matter, legislation, I can say you have to read the fine print, and you do, but you have to actually consider the hidden agendas. It's basically an order that accelerates the U.S. movement towards a central bank digital currency, so-called CBDC. These are happening all over the world. Beijing already has one. They're past the prototype stage. They kind of rolled that out during the Winter Olympics last February. Believe it or not, the Bahamas has a digital currency. There are a few other countries that have already gone in that direction. Europe is, the European Central Bank is very far along. The U.S. and the Federal Reserve, because they print the currency, they understood the importance of it. They were watching it, but they were taking their time, like, hey, we're the biggest payment currency, biggest reserve currency in the world, which the dollar is, and we don't want to race into something if it's not thought out. And they were doing a kind of a joint venture R&D program with MIT. Okay, they got some experts there, so that seems to make sense. But all of a sudden, they accelerated it, and they said, no, we got to move fast on this, and we got to catch up. And that's what 14067 was about. But that's what you could get from reading. But what's the hidden agenda? First of all, just a little bit of background on central bank digital currencies. It's still the dollar. A digital dollar is still a dollar. A digital Chinese yuan is still a yuan. A digital euro is still a euro. So it's not a new currency, but it is a new payment channel, and it is a new form of the currency, if you want to think of it that way, even though it's still the dollar. And it goes hand in hand with getting rid of cash. In other words, I'll spend in a minute, we'll get into what the central bank digital currency, what the hidden agenda is behind that. But as I go through the list of the really bad things that can happen, you say, okay, but I still got cash. I can go down to the bank and get whatever, $10,000 or $100,000 in cash. By the way, that's not easy to do. I say that. It's legal. It's not illegal. But try doing it. They'll tell you to come back, make an appointment. They don't have that much money. They got to ship it in. You better show up with like your birth certificate and 5 character witnesses, and then they'll report you to the Treasury, actually the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, knows the word crime, FinCEN for short, Northern Virginia, and you'll go in a file next to I'm in here. It's not so easy to get your cash, but you can in theory, and that's the alternative. So they have to not only push the digital currency agenda, which we'll talk about in a minute, but they have to get rid of cash, because as long as you have cash, you can do an end run around this. So these two things are coming down the track pretty fast. Now, flipping back to the central bank digital currency, it's not a cryptocurrency. It's not on a blockchain. A blockchain is just a ledger. They've been around since the 80s, no big deal. But this ledger will be maintained by somebody, probably the Federal Reserve. There could be a new government agency doing it. It's like a bank account. So we might quickly end up in a world where I have an account at a bank, you guys have accounts at banks. Those banks are either members of the Federal Reserve System, or they're smaller banks that are correspondents of bigger banks that are members of the Federal Reserve System, like Bank of America or Wells Fargo. Heaven help you with Wells Fargo. But the point being, the banks kind of keep all the books. We might be in a world where you would have an account at the Fed. Everyone listening would have an account at the Fed. We'd have it on our iPhone or our Samsung or whatever our mobile phone is. And if I send you money, the Fed takes it out of my account, sends it to your account. End of story. Kind of like a Venmo type of thing with larger denominations, etc. That has implications in terms of disintermediating the banks. If you can do that, which you can technically, who needs banks? But the selling point is it's better, faster, cheaper, okay? Which it is. So for example, I go to a bookstore and I buy a book with a credit card. I say I get the book. The merchant, the retailer has this receivable. And so they sell it to what's called a merchant acquirer. Merchant acquirers are finance businesses that buy a whole bunch of receivables from a whole bunch of little retailers or even larger retailers. They then take that bundle of receivables, now we're talking hundreds of millions or more, and they deliver it to MasterCard or Visa, and then they get paid. Obviously, they make a little money on that. MasterCard and Visa then send those receivables to the banks that issue the credit cards, and then the bank sends me a bill and I pay the bill. So think about that. I buy a book, but you get 5 financial intermediaries. You get me, the retailer, the merchant acquirer, MasterCard or Visa, and the issuing bank. And the total fees are like 2.5%, 3%. So why do we need 5 financial intermediaries with, let's say, 3% fees to buy a book when you could just have an account at the Fed and everything whips through the Fed fast and easy and inexpensive? And that's all true. That is how it could work if you had this digital dollar. But let's assume the banks continue to play a role, because the Fed's job, people talk about, it's the Fed's job, reduce unemployment, squash inflation. Now they want a Green New Deal. The Fed's supposed to make sure that nobody lends money to ExxonMobil, even though we're out of oil. But those are like ancillary. The Fed's main job from the beginning, from 1913, really 1907 onward, is to prop up the banks. Like, that's why they're there. So I doubt they'll disintermediate the banks. But either way, you're going to have a faster, cheaper, better system for making payments. But what else? And this is the key, and this is why we're sounding the alarm a little bit on Executive Order 14067. So once it's digital, a couple things. First of all, they know your whereabouts. Now, they already know your whereabouts from your iPhone, unless you turn your iPhone off, and not just turn it off, but put it in what's called a Faraday sac, which is a special woven fabric, a metallic weave that blocks radiation. And by the way, do the same thing with your EasyPass and a bunch of other stuff. But unless you do that, then they know where you are through your iPhone or your Samsung or whatever. So they already know your whereabouts. We have facial recognition software. People go, I'm going to wear a mask and sunglasses and pull my hat down. Okay. They have what's called gait recognition software, GAIT, meaning how you walk. Believe it or not, everybody walks slightly differently. And it's like a fingerprint. So even if you're wearing a mask, they see you walking down the street, they're like, that's Kim, or that's Robert, or Jim, or as the case may be. So they already know a lot, and they know your whereabouts. But now they're going to know what you're buying, right? Because every product has a SKU, stock keeping unit code with a QR digital scan. They're going to know what you're buying. And this digital currency is programmable, meaning they can block certain purchases or not. So let's say you donate money to Elise Stefanik. She's an up-and-coming Republican leadership in upstate district in New York, or heaven help you if you donate money to Donald Trump. They'll know that, first of all. And you might find that your account's frozen. Or let's say they want to see, right now, if you work and you're an employee, it's a technical term defined, and you get paid and you get a W-2 at the end of the year, but they withhold it from your payment. You get paid every 2 weeks or whatever. They withhold taxes from your wages, and then you file your W-2, file your tax return, you reconcile, maybe you get a refund, maybe you owe a little bit, but they got the money up front through withholding. But that's not true for independent contractors and professionals, so doctors, lawyers, architects, landscaping, so anybody who's not a W-2 employee doesn't have withholding. They got to pay their taxes. But what if they could just take it out of your bank account? Say, yeah, okay, you're a doctor, you put the money in this bank, and I'm just going to take some number, 20% out of your bank account every month. And yeah, we'll send you a statement, 1099, file your tax return, and you owe or you get a refund, but no more honor system, in other words, and no more waiting till year end. We're going to take it out of your bank account. Or what if, as a form of stimulus, even though it's not stimulus, but they'll call it that, they say you get money in your bank account. Okay, but we're going to put a countdown clock on your bank account. And if you don't spend 10% of it in the next 30 days, we're going to deduct that much. In other words, use it or lose it. So now all of a sudden, yeah, I worked hard, I made this money, it's in the bank, but you're telling me if I don't spend it, I'm going to lose it anyway, so I might as well go spend it. And of course, the idea is to stimulate the economy. But the point is, the number of things you can do, from surveillance to identifying your political preferences, withholding taxes, account freezes, account seizures, time limitations on your money's countdown clock, it expires after a certain period of time, etc. I could go on, but you take the point, which is it's not your money anymore. I've always said to people, you put your money in the bank, it's not your money, it's the bank's money, and they'll give it to you if they feel like it. This is that same idea on stilts. And this is, and now the government's involved, and everything easier, faster, cheaper about payments is also easier, faster, cheaper about surveillance, confiscation, account freezes, etc. And then people say to me, they explain what I just said to you guys, and they say, oh, that'll never happen. It's already happening. It's already here.